Let's rank all the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies, including the new one that literally just came out today. Let's get into it.
What's your favorite scary movie? Name it.
We'll tear your soul apart.
Well, I'm Pennywise the dancing now.
Oh, Lord on the beast!
God, don't do that.
But sometimes dead is better.
Hey everybody, what's up? KillJoy Jake here, and instead of having friends, I have horror movies. Today we're going to be ranking all 9 of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies. I'm super excited to get into this, but first I'm going to need y'all to like this video, subscribe if you're new here, and support me on Patreon if possible. The link for that will be in the description below. So getting into this real quick, coming in last place, just to dive right on into this, is like, I feel like there's no other option for last place. Well, that's not exactly necessarily true. Texas Chainsaw 3D is my 9th place film. Because at least with The Next Generation, you can sit down and enjoy it. It's a so bad it's good film. This movie is just a so bad it's bad kind of movie, in my opinion. Multiple plot holes throughout. Alexandria Daddario's character should be like 40 technically, if you do the math on when it, to modern day, to the 70s. It doesn't make any sense to why she would be a 20-year-old girl. There's just so much wrong with this film. Digital kills, too, in a movie series that has been known for practical effects and disturbing kills throughout up until this point, pretty much. I don't know, man. This is a massive misstep for the franchise for me personally, and I hate trashing a film like this. I always try to find something I like about it. Alexandria Daddario's in it. She's cool. But the rest of this movie just feels like a massive misfire to me. Was not a big fan of TC3D, as I like to call it. Sounds like a droid from Star Wars when you have all that typed out. It's weird. But 8th place is, yeah, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Next Generation, which this is a movie that I enjoy, but it's just a disaster. I mean, it is a so bad it's good kind of flick, and it at least it ended up being that. You could be Texas Chainsaw 3D and just end up not being good at all, but at least this film is fun. It is a fun time. It is just a very, very silly flick that I don't think was intended to be very silly. This is the disaster artist kind of movie. The Room. This is the Room version of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and has 2 actors whose last names I cannot spell for the life of me. Renee Zellweger and Matthew McConaughey are both in this film in like movies that they did. This is a movie they did before they got famous, which is shocking to me. I cannot believe this movie got released after Matthew McConaughey became like huge, as well as Renee Zellweger in the late 90s. Completely insane to me that this this movie even got out. I don't know. I don't know what happened with this movie. I think they were just like, hey, let's make another Texas Chainsaw film. Who cares what happens in it? Let's just put something out, to make some money. And they did. That's what they did. And it's a disaster, but it's fun. It's a dumpster fire. You don't want to put it out. You kind of want to watch it, but it's not a good thing. So, I don't know. That's how I feel about it, but it's still like, hey, I'll watch it, sure. Coming in 7th place, which will probably shock some people, is Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. This is the Halloween 4 of this franchise, and at least like Halloween 4 had some interesting and some new stuff, even though it kind of copies just the whole plot of the original film. That's how I feel about this movie. It has the cool chainsaw, the Saw is family, that's iconic from this movie, but overall, it really doesn't do much different than the original film. It's kind of just a worse version of the original. I don't see the point in watching this film. You might as well just watch the original. It kind of just copies it. Every single beat of this movie is exactly the same as the original film, but a little worse. So besides Vigo being in this movie, it's you can skip it, honestly. It really has no point. I mean, it is technically like a better made movie than the previous 2 that I mentioned, but still, it doesn't really do a whole lot for me besides the cool chainsaw, which is kind of weird that they would have that. That would probably be super pricey. Like it's a custom made chainsaw, but hey, whatever, man. Coming in 6th place is Leatherface, just the movie Leatherface from like, what, 2017 that came out? I only saw that movie once, but the reason it ranks so high for me, it's not a very well-made film, but at least it tries to do something different, and I give it props for that. I think it's got some problems with the fact that you have this mystery surrounding your whole movie. Like, once again, something you tried to do that was different, which I appreciate, but it kind of falls flat. The whole mystery about who Leatherface is, it ends up being not at all the person who is very clearly Leatherface, and it's just kind of whack. And besides that, there's not a whole lot to love about this movie. Like, all the scenes in like the hospital and stuff are like kind of freaky, but are also kind of weird and unearned. Like, there's a sexual situation, for example, in that movie that is just like, why am I watching this right now? One of those sequences ends with a dude just randomly flying out of a window in a wheelchair too, which is once again just like this feels unearned. Why am I watching this? This doesn't make any sense. Kills need build up. I need to be emotionally invested in characters, and I don't really get that in this movie that much, which is a big problem. It's not a very well made film, but I appreciate it for trying to do something different with this franchise that has kind of done a lot of the same in the past. So yeah, it gets props there for me. Coming in 5th place is the new film Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022. Although I enjoyed it, I think it's a fun film, it's a great slasher flick, and it's got some fucking brutal kills and some decently written characters. Besides that, though, it's just a slasher flick at the end of the day, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original, never started off as a slasher flick, in my opinion. I don't really think it is a slasher movie. It's more of an art house psychological thriller with slasher elements. I don't think at the end of the day that's where it was rooted at. It's not really a slasher movie, that first one, and I was kind of hoping for in a newer movie to go back to those roots, those grisly psychological thriller roots that the original movie did so well that some of the other, actually all of the other sequels really didn't cash in on. I mean, I guess you could argue the 2003 movie kind of goes back to that, but that's a slasher. That film is solely a slasher flick. And I don't know, I liked this film, it was fun, it was a bloody good time, but overall kind of just middle of the road for me, personally. Coming in 4th place, though, is Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning. And this movie ranks so high for me personally because what the 2003 movie did well, this movie expands upon in a very positive way. It puts R. Lee Ermey at kind of like the focal point of this movie, who gives a fantastic performance in both films as like this crazy sheriff character. It's kind of a reimagining of the Sawyer family, which I really like about the remake series. It does some different stuff, and overall both these movies I think are really fun and some of the better films from this entire franchise. The Beginning, on the other hand, has two things that I really love about it. First of all, of course, putting R. Lee Ermey as kind of like your focal point of the movie. He gave a great performance in the 2003 movie. He's probably one of the best parts of that original film. And then you kind of like give him a bigger role in this next one. Great choice, in my opinion. That was a great idea, a great step moving forward with this prequel movie. And the ending is super brutal. But this movie kind of suffers from prequel sickness, as I like to say, where like anytime you do a prequel, you kind of know what's going to happen at the end. So it's not really as exciting as your original movie. It's tough to make a prequel, but as far as prequels go, this is probably a top 10 for me, honestly. This one does have a lot of brutal things going on in it. I kind of expected the Sawyer family to win overall because it's like, yeah, what if they all die, then like the next movie doesn't make any sense, you know? So there's that, and you kind of lose that suspense in a prequel, but overall you still have some of the most gruesome kills from the entire franchise here. You have an ending that's super upsetting, and maybe one of the most upsetting endings in the entire franchise besides the original. I liked it. I'm a big fan of The Beginning. I almost like it more than the 2003 movie, but that's of course my 3rd place, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003. Definitely one of the better remakes out there, from Platinum Dunes especially, who kind of has a history of not making such great remakes. Some of the worst remakes from the thousands did come from that franchise, from that production studio, I mean. And we get this movie first from them. This was one of their first movies that they produced, was Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003, and they did a great job with it. I think it has a great cast, it's got some great kills, and overall it's just a really fun slasher flick that's made really well and harkens back to the original a little bit. I think it captures that tone that the original movie has, just a tiny bit, not as much as I was hoping. This is much more of a slasher flick at the end of the day. And one of my biggest negatives about it is that they try to recreate shots from the original like a lot of the sequels do, and it's just like, okay, this is just annoying, you know? Like do your own thing. And it does. At some points, like I said, they kind of recreate the whole idea of the Sawyer family a little bit. They expand upon it, I guess, is more maybe the better way of saying it, which is cool. I'm glad that this movie does some things different, but a lot of it is kind of just rehashing the original, which is my biggest negative for it. But overall it stands on its own, and TCM 2003 is even some people's favorite movie from this franchise, which I think is so cool. It's a good film. I enjoy it. It's just not my favorite from this entire franchise. Coming in second place is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which is a wildly different film from all of the other movies on this list. I know a lot of people don't like this film because of the wild shift in tone. This is much more of a horror comedy than anything. Once again, done by Tobe Hooper, which is fucking sweet. I really like this movie. I think it's a really good time, and it has one of my favorite performances in a horror movie ever from Bill Moseley as Chop Top, which, wow, I would love to have seen All American Massacre, which was this like canceled movie that apparently there's footage of. I've never seen any of the footage from this movie. It was supposed to come out in like the year 2000, I believe. And it just got, I believe it got canceled. I'm not 100% sure about all the backstory behind it. I would love to do a massive video on that one day. The unmade Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies. I know there's like a couple other ones, like a couple other projects that were talked about that never happened. But this was probably one of the most highly anticipated movies that just unfortunately never happened. It was going to be like kind of a sequel to 2, I believe. Once again, I have not done a shit ton of research on that, but it was going to bring back Bill Moseley as Chop Top in a new movie. But unfortunately, as of right now, all we have of Chop Top is from TCM 2. But hey, that's good enough, man. I mean, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is just a wonderfully made horror comedy that I absolutely love. It's a much sillier version of the original film, and it's a much bigger movie too. It feels much more Hollywood, which actually in most cases detracts from how much I like a movie, but in this case it kind of elevates it a little bit. It makes it a little more epic. It makes it a little more crazier and much more in the vein of Army of Darkness more than anything, which I appreciate with this movie. It's a very different film. It's like not at all what you're expecting from a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. It's very silly, has some crazy kills, it's got some crazy moments, and it's also scary too. That opening sequence is horrifying on the highway. Great reintroduction of Leatherface, and I don't know, it's a very well made movie overall, and it's almost my favorite of the entire series. I know some people don't like this because of, once again, the shift in tone, but I appreciate it for what it is. I'm glad they didn't just make a second film that was exactly like the original, you know? I mean, at least they did something different. You got to do that with sequels. You can't just make the exact same movie over and over and over again, like unfortunately some franchises are. Some franchises just do that, unfortunately. So this one, at least this franchise, although I have some criticisms about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise, at least not every single sequel is exactly like the original. But we could use another film in this franchise that harkens back to that psychological terror and art house feel of the original movie. And speaking of that original movie, number 1 is easily the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original, a horror classic, a 5-star film in my opinion. Not a whole lot could top this, I don't think. All the story behind this movie, I mean, the low budget, they barely were able to even make this film. It's a fucking classic, man. It's not super bloody or gory either. I feel like a lot of people remember this movie for being super bloody and gory, but it's not. It's much more about the psychological dread and just terror of being in this situation more than anything. The reveal of Leatherface for the first time in this film is one of like the scariest moments I have ever seen in a horror flick, bar none. Oh my god, and then when he slams that metal door, oh, I mean, chills every single time. I love it. When that image of him picking, I can't remember the girl's name, but the girl in the red shorts, he like picks her up. He's like that massive of a dude to do that. Gunnar Hansen was just an amazing human being. Rest in peace. He was the best Leatherface. No one is ever going to top him, in my opinion. He was so good in this original film. He gives a great performance. Literally, I mean, my only criticism of the entire film, I wouldn't have changed a thing, honestly, is Leatherface makes some whack noises at points in this film, which I kind of wish he was doing like a little more of a like a caveman grunt, and he's doing like this like really high pitched stuff, which is disturbing. But it's like, for his character, I'm imagining this big brute of a man, like this monstrous, gigantic being. I was expecting maybe some like lower sounds coming out of him. I feel like that's a little more realistic, personally, and that's my, like, literally my only criticism of the film. I think it's perfect otherwise. It's a horrifying flick with a really crazy story and plot and characters that are all very well written, and just disturbing scenes from every single person in this entire flick. Great performances, and one of the most heartbreaking endings of any horror flick ever. It's like, if you take it just on the surface level, just at surface value, what it is, it's kind of a happy ending. But even though, like, you could take the end, like, let's compare it to the ending of Jaws, for example. The ending of Jaws, we kind of see something similar. We see our main character kill the shark, and it's successful. He jumps into the water. He's been horrified of going into the ocean the entire movie, and he's like, oh, this is great. I killed the beast in the water, so I'm no longer afraid. He doesn't say that, but it's kind of just like a given thing. Like, he killed the thing he was so afraid of, and now he can just be in the water for the first time, basically. And he's no longer afraid. He even has that line about, I can't believe what I was missing. Like, this is awesome. And it's a very happy ending. It's great. You get this character who overcomes all the trauma. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the exact opposite. You have a character who started off kind of chill without a whole lot of fear, being probably going to be turning into this paranoid, messed up, traumatized mess by the end of this film, which is so disturbing and messed up, and we see that perfectly exampled in the ending of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original. I don't think there's anything in this series that's scarier than the ending of this film. Leatherface dancing around with his chainsaw and Sally Hardesty just clinging to the back of this truck, screaming for her life in one of the coolest performances I have ever seen in a horror flick. I just love that original film so much. It'll be tough for any sequel in this franchise to top it. I do like a lot of these sequels. Like I said, I mean, TCM2 is awesome. I think it's a very well-made horror comedy. The remake is great. This new one that just came out is also very good. I like a lot of the films in this franchise, but overall, man, I mean, nothing's gonna top that original film. It's a masterpiece. It's a classic. It's what put Tobe Hooper on the map. I mean, you know what else Tobe Hooper has done? A lot of stuff. I mean, his work speaks for itself, man. Tobe Hooper is just an incredible horror director and should be recognized as one of the greats. Although sometimes he's not. Like, we talk a lot about John Carpenter, Wes Craven, David Cronenberg on this page, but unfortunately I don't talk a whole lot about Tobe Hooper, which is a shame, because the guy's amazing. He's made some incredible horror flicks over the years, and this being one of them. So thank you so much for watching this ranking. What's your ranking? Leave me it in the comments below, and we can talk about it. It would be sick to see different rankings, because I'm sure people rank this franchise very differently. There's a lot of crazy flicks in this entire in this series over the years, so I would like to see what your ranking is. Leave it in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this ranking video on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you're new here. Also, if you want to see this channel grow a little more than it already has, which I am greatly appreciative of, you can support me on Patreon. The link for that will be in the description below. Just for $1 a month, you get an extra video every single month. And if you support me at the higher tiers, you get even more videos a month. So make sure to check that out. The link for that will be in the description below. Thank you all again for watching, and as always, don't forget to kill it out there, y'all.